What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always with you guys. We're flying solo once again this week. I will be here Monday, Tuesday. Nick will be back on Wednesday. I know we're all excited to get our producer Nick back on the show. But the Pittsburgh Steelers, they are 9-3, and they are back. It wasn't the prettiest of games. There were obviously some issues. It started off a little bit scary, but the Pittsburgh Steelers are alive once again. They grow their lead in the AFC North. All of the talk last week about the Pittsburgh Steelers being a team that is just not here. They are not alive, and it is over. Can they even win two more games this season? Are the Cincinnati Bengals going to smoke them in Week 13? TJ Watt is done. Russell Wilson is washed. Mike Tomlin should be fired. Arthur Smith go to North Carolina. Najee Harris, Mike Williams, George Pickens, and everybody in between was getting, well, blasted by every analyst that could possibly say anything. But it took 1 week, 10 days to be exact, for the Pittsburgh Steelers to be back and for their contention status to grow. And for everybody to look at a game where they score 41 points, the most points that they have scored since 2018, and say, well, hello, welcome back to Pittsburgh, welcome back to the winning ways, and welcome back to where the Pittsburgh Steelers should be, and could go this season. We're diving into my game reactions in this one. Russell Wilson and what he means for the Pittsburgh Steelers and how he answered literally every single concern that anyone had outside of one. Mike Tomlin sends a pretty stern message to George Pickens, and we'll address where that stands and why. Yeah, worry, obviously, but for a 23-year-old, maybe there's some hope. Nick Herbig and Peyton Wilson bring a bright future to the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, but that's just where things are getting started. The AFC North race is getting wider. The Pittsburgh Steelers, well, they are looking good. At what point do you start believing this is it? They are going to pull off the AFC North crown this season. And as we do every day, especially on some Victory Mondays, I will be answering all of your questions. So make sure that you toss them in the chat throughout the live stream. I'll get to all of them before we head out of here. Let's start with a 41-38 victory over the Cincinnati Bengals that starts with a blown call by the refs that gives the Cincinnati Bengals a 7-0 lead over the Pittsburgh Steelers on a play that should not have been an interception. Obviously slapped the top of George Pickens' helmet, and Sean Hockley after the game is saying, well, it looked like he stumbled and that is what caused the contact. Very untrue. And another example of why the refs, well, this season, just like last season and the season before that, are becoming an issue for pretty much everybody across the league. But the Pittsburgh Steelers come back. They put up 44 points, a game that they have not done since 2018. Russell Wilson throws for 400 yards, and it is the first time, the most ever, a Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback has thrown against the Cincinnati Bengals in the existence of the Pittsburgh Steelers. That is a wild stat to start this one, and that's where our conversation will begin. Russell Wilson came in against the Cincinnati Bengals with a ton of questions. You lose to the Cleveland Browns. The week before that, you don't look good against the Baltimore Ravens. The week before that, if it wasn't for a game-winning touchdown throw to Mike Williams, everybody has very alarming, screaming questions about the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback position and whether or not they can make a change. In 10 days, everything and anything was brought to the table and put on the table for the Pittsburgh Steelers and their quarterback situation, including one insider saying that it can certainly happen that the Pittsburgh Steelers can make a quarterback change throughout the season before week 18 in the playoffs. How is that even possible? Everybody inside the building knew that that was not going to happen. But obviously, to quiet the noise on the outside, Russell Wilson had to come out and do what everybody wanted him to do. And he did all of it. He finishes the game 29-38, 414 yards, 3 touchdowns, an interception that should not have counted, and a 126 passer rating. And I think the most joyous part of all this is that Russell Wilson did it all while doing it all. And that is what the Steelers needed to see out of their starting quarterback. It included moon balls, obviously, but it also included a lot of throws over the middle of the field. It included a lot of moving the pocket, which was beautiful to see. It included a lot of dump offs to Najee Harris and Cordero Patterson to show that, hey, the middle of the field is wide open. Let's utilize it. It showed a lot of quick passes. It showed a just beautiful pass to Calvin Austin for a touchdown that is becoming a thing of beauty between the quarterback and the third-year wide receiver. And it just showed a veteran quarterback that is still very much so alive, that it is not an overreaction to say played the best of any quarterback in the AFC North. I mean, maybe outside of Jameis Winston, who plays tonight, this week, and utilized every single passing option outside of Connor Hayward and Mike Williams. And to be honest, that's very much so okay. Because if you're only going to leave two guys off the table, I get it. Everybody wants Mike Williams to be involved, and we'll answer those questions here shortly. But if everybody is involved, Van Jefferson included, Darnell Washington, Pat Freiermuth, Cordero Patterson, Najee Harris, Calvin Austin, and obviously George Pickens included, then that is a thing of beauty for the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Where I stand currently is Russell Wilson closed all conversations about the Pittsburgh Steelers and a potential quarterback change that wasn't really real, but obviously we had to address, and obviously would have some speculation and some rumors building around it after a couple of bad performances. Well, I'm sorry, but you put up 400 yards against the Bengals. You win a game with 44 points. That door is closed. Russell Wilson is here. And I think maybe if he has a couple more of these, you really do put him in the MVP conversation. He can't win it, obviously. You're going to give that to a Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or probably, hopefully, a Saquon Barkley. But Russell Wilson, man, he is having himself a game. On the other side of things, Mike Williams does not catch a pass. Everybody's going to have questions about that. I see we have a couple already, and we'll answer those later. But George Pickens gets a stern message from Mike Tomlin after the game because not one, but two unsportsmanlike conduct punting penalties get called on him. The first one goes against him possibly being ejected from this game. The second one, he avoids it. And Sean Hockley afterwards says that, well, it wasn't towards a player or towards an opposing team. Therefore, it does not count towards disqualification. Mike Tomlin after the game had this to say, quote, "He's just got to grow up, man. This is an emotional game, man. These division games are big. He's got a target on his back because he's George. He understands that, but he's got to grow up. He's got to grow up in a hurry." And to be honest, he's 23 years old. I'm very much so okay with the talent. I'm very much so okay with issues here and there multiple times in a game. When Broderick Jones has to come up to you and tell you to calm down, that's becoming an issue because the Steelers are going to have bigger games. The Steelers are going to be in moments where you need George Pickens. You cannot go without George Pickens. This was a great example of that because, yeah, George Pickens led the team, but he only had 3 receptions, excuse me. But if he's not there for 74 yards and a touchdown, do the Steelers win? Are they able to open and spread the field as much as they do? Because obviously a lot of attention is on George Pickens. Those are massive, very alarming questions for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And when you play the Philadelphia Eagles, when you play the Kansas City Chiefs, when you play the Baltimore Ravens again, when you play the Bengals at the end of the season that could decide a playoff seed, when you go into the playoffs, you can't risk these things. You can't look at it and say, George is just a kid, and that's okay. I understand. And once in a while, that's totally fine. But this is 3 or 4 games in a row that is becoming an issue. The Steelers have to address it. I don't know if it could ever be fixed. I have yet to learn that it could be fixed because this is 2 years in a row now that Mike Tomlin has said numerous times that George Pickens has maturity issues and he has to grow up. I'm sure that there will be conversations. I'm sure those conversations will be a little bit more aggressive this time around because, well, Mike Tomlin made it very open and very known that he's got an issue with it, and hopefully he addresses it. But showing up late for work, getting fined 3 times this season, and now nearly getting kicked out of a game, George Pickens has some stuff that he's got to clean up. And I'm not going to sit here and bag on him because he had 74 yards and a touchdown, and the Pittsburgh Steelers scored 44 points. And this is a victory Monday where we should be joyous and proud and happy. It snowed for the first time in Pittsburgh last night, and that's just more cause to smile, I guess. If you're Charlie Batch, you're having a great day. But he does have to clean it up. It's got to come fast. And if it doesn't come fast, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers have an even bigger concern because you don't know when that will actually improve or actually get better, or you can actually fix the maturity issues with George Pickens. And you don't know when that's going to cost you a game, because right now it's a concern that it might. On the other side of the football, Nick Herbig and Peyton Wilson, man, they only put the icing on the cake for TJ Watt, reminding everybody. I was so happy that TJ Watt reminded everybody, because that's where we stood. We stood where Myles Garrett was talking so much smack that people were starting to believe it, that 10 days go by and 2 games and TJ Watt is almost non-existent, and you're looking at it going, is it over? Is TJ Watt done? Well, they used those 10 days, and that was the best thing about the Pittsburgh Steelers in this one, is that you saw that the Pittsburgh Steelers used all 10 of those days to readjust and find exactly what was missing on both sides of the football. The middle of the field, dump off passes to the running back, utilizing everybody, including your tight ends, especially your tight ends. I mean, Pat Freiermuth led the team in receptions with 6. On defense, it was move TJ Watt around, have him force some plays, get some pressure on these quarterbacks, because if TJ Watt is getting taken out of a game, you need to find pressure in other ways. And that's what the Pittsburgh Steelers were able to do in this one. They sent Patrick Queen. They sent Landon Roberts. They let Peyton Wilson and Nick Herbig eat. And that was a thing of beauty. Now, obviously, giving up 38 points is concerning. And I'm not going to sit here and say that the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is great and they are in a phenomenal spot. They're in a worrisome spot. But the Bengals have the best offense a 4-9 team, a 4-8 team has ever had in the NFL. I mean, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Chase Brown and T. Higgins and Mike Gesicki are phenomenal players. And you saw very quickly that the Bengals defense is exactly why the Bengals are where they're at. It's not the offense. It is 100% the defense. I don't know if the Steelers should be very concerned that they gave up 38 points. I don't know if they should be concerned that this is multiple games in a row of over 20 points or just about 20 points, if you exclude the Baltimore Ravens, which is an asterisk game for the Steelers, obviously. But I will say that if TJ Watt dominates a football game, and if Nick Herbig can create a play that comes alongside that, and Dante Jackson continues to turn the ball over, which makes up for really some lackluster play throughout the rest of the game when it comes to Dante Jackson. Well, the Steelers, they give themselves opportunities. And that's all you can ask for right now is opportunities, because, well, Russell Wilson and the offense, they have fed off those opportunities. They have, for a majority of it, made the most of keeping the offense or the opposing offense in a situation where you could win. I just don't know if it's going to hold up against Philadelphia. I don't know if it's going to hold up against Kansas City. I don't know if it's going to hold up against Baltimore a second time around. I don't know. What I do know is that TJ Watt is back and a favorite for Defensive Player of the Year. And that is huge, because that was the other overreaction that, quite frankly, was kind of bothering me throughout the week, was everybody talking about TJ Watt being done. TJ Watt is the farthest thing from done. He's a phenomenal football player. He's the best defensive player in the NFL, and the Steelers needed to make some adjustments. They made some adjustments. Now you got to figure out Joey Porter Jr. Now you got to figure out Patrick Queen going from a high to a low, and how do you just keep them consistent? How do you have less of this and more of this? Where is Minkah Fitzpatrick going? Because that was a brutal game by Minkah. Brutal game by Minkah. And I don't like bagging on Minkah. I think Minka's a phenomenal football player, but bad routes or pursuits, angles to tacklers or to running backs, just almost no coverage, at least not close enough to make an impact. And all the questions that surrounded him really just showed themselves on the field on Sunday. And that was concerning. Minka's a concern right now. The Steelers defense is a massive concern. Again, I feel much better that the Steelers defense can turn things around than their offense. And when TJ Watt is playing TJ Watt football and you get Alex Highsmith back in a week or two and Nick Herbig continues to do his things, you hope that the rest can just adjust and play great football as well. But that's a big, giant question that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have to answer. And we'll see if they do. But I am just happy, thankful that the Pittsburgh Steelers showed once again that TJ Watt is the best defensive player in football and that their offense could hold on in games to win themselves games. Because in years past, this would have been a blowout for Cincinnati, and it would not have been very good. Let's finish it off before we dive into all of these phenomenal questions with the AFC North, my friends. The AFC North. The Steelers have clearly won the Deontay Johnson trade, and I know everybody smiles as I say that, and I wish nothing but the best for Deontay Johnson. I liked Deontay Johnson in Pittsburgh. I thought he was a good dude, at least to me. I get it that he had issues. I get it that on the field there were some struggles. I understand all that. I still think Deontay Johnson works incredibly hard at his craft. I think Deontay Johnson was nothing but cordial, polite, and respectable to me, and, well, that means a lot in my book. And I wish Deontay nothing but a successful back half of his career. But he played 0 snaps yesterday for the Baltimore Ravens. And in a loss to the Philadelphia Eagles, where their offense looked, well, terrible, their defense looked very confused at times. And Justin Tucker proved once again that he is not it anymore. And you hope that it's just the yips, because a Hall of Famer, you hate to see a downfall of a Hall of Famer. You hate to see it, no matter who they are or who they're playing for. But to be very honest, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you're sitting around right now going, Justin Tucker at Heinz Field in the playoffs with the game on the line, I'm feeling pretty okay about that situation. I'm feeling pretty okay about getting them there and putting the pressure on a guy that cannot handle the pressure right now. And there are no signs of that pressure turning around. And you got to feel pretty good about it. I don't know what's up with Justin Tucker. What I do know is Lamar Jackson didn't really have his best game yesterday, that the Ravens offensive line stunk, that Derrick Henry was, he looked as good as he did against Pittsburgh, which wasn't very good. And Deontay Johnson ain't out there, which means that the Pittsburgh Steelers traded for a guy that is leading the team in interceptions. Whether or not he's playing the greatest is a different conversation, but he is leading the team in interceptions for a wide receiver that is no longer on the team that he was on, and that team has turned it around, seemingly. They're still going to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, but they're doing better. They might have jumped the gun on the Deontay thing, and Baltimore got a guy that is doing nothing. The Pittsburgh Steelers continue to win the Deontay Johnson trade and lose the AFC North, or win the AFC North, and that's great. A 1.5 game lead. You go to Cleveland. You got to feel good about your second time around against Cleveland, right? You have to feel like the Steelers historically play bad on those Thursday night games. They historically play well after 10 days off. They're going to come back. It's home. Acrisure Stadium's going to be bumping. Jameis, he had some magic. I don't think the Steelers let that magic last 2 full games, and they're probably going to have a better plan against Myles Garrett, because I get it that there are questions about Arthur Smith, but Arthur Smith is a smart enough guy to say, I'm going to figure this out this time around. And you got to put some faith in your offensive coordinator. And you know that TJ Watt has that thing circled. You know that bulletin board material means most to the guys who play the best. And, well, TJ Watt plays the best. And it's dangerous. It's like giving Tom Brady or Michael Jordan some crazy stuff to talk about. And I'm not saying TJ Watt's the greatest of all time. I'm just saying he's in the caliber of the greatest in the league. And you don't give those guys stuff to just add to piss them off before a game. And that's what the Cleveland Browns did. You got to feel good about where the Steelers stand going into week 14, which could grow their lead even more. And then they'll get another opportunity at Baltimore, and they'll finish it off against Cincinnati. That's where you want the Pittsburgh Steelers to be heading into week 14. And I'll ask you guys this question, answer it in the chat if you would like. At what point do the Pittsburgh Steelers look like a team that are going to, not hopefully, going to win the AFC North? I think it's week 16. You beat the Cleveland Browns and you beat the Philadelphia Eagles, which is a tall task. I understand that. But if you could do those things, you're in spots, you're in a contention spot where you are going to win this. where the AFC North is now yours. And yeah, you have 2-3 tough games after that, but there are opportunities to be there, and you got to feel pretty good about it. I'm feeling good about week 16 being the week that the Pittsburgh Steelers put their stamp on crown of the AFC North, and things are looking good, my friends. With that said, I am ready to answer all of your questions, so please make sure you're tossing them in the chat. I want to get to all of them before we head out of here on this Victory Monday, a phenomenal Victory Monday, where Russell Wilson proves once again that he is the guy and that you signed him for a reason. I got a text after the game. I'll leave you with this one before we go into break real fast. I got a text after the game. I sent a text. I'll say this. I sent a text and said, what does Russell Wilson get paid? I sent this to a source. What does Russell Wilson get paid in a year? And this is just a league source. This is not a Pittsburgh Steelers source. This is a league source. What does Russell Wilson get paid after this season? He texted me back. He said he first sent me a link to a Jonathan Jones article with CBS Sports that said anywhere from 10 to 30 million. He said if he has games like this, he's looking at 35 plus. He said that if he has bad games, he's looking at 5 plus. He said for the Pittsburgh Steelers, as team friendly as it can get is what he believes. And I said, man, that is a great place to be for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because you got to think that Russell Wilson is thinking Super Bowl. And if he could win a Super Bowl in Pittsburgh, he'd be very okay with that. It does not matter how much more money he made. He's married to Sierra. He's made $200+ million in his career. I understand that money is unlimited and Mr. Unlimited can make as much as he wants, but he's made plenty in his career. And I believe that right now he wants to go out with a great legacy, and he believes Pittsburgh is that legacy. Obviously, there's still plenty of story to tell here, but it feels good to get that text and say, yeah, I believe that could be the case. On the other side of the break, we're going to answer all of your questions, so please make sure that you're tossing them in the chat. I see we got a bunch of them about Mike Williams, Russell Wilson, Arthur Smith, Mike Tomlin, George Pickens, and etc. We'll dive into all those, but first, we got a quick word from our boys over at Game Time. Football season is on fire right now, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, well, they're looking pretty good, and I don't think there's anything that brings more excitement right now than thinking about going to the game. And right now, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play even easier. Game Time Picks features out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Obviously, Pittsburgh Steelers, Cleveland Browns, round 2 is red hot, but you could go to Christmas Day, Philadelphia, if you're really feeling feisty, in Cincinnati and Baltimore, both on the radar and the upcoming schedule for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let me tell you why Game Time is incredible. They have a couple of things. First, the Game Time Picks, which curates to make it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc., all in pricing, which shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Seat views to get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you ever buy. The lowest price guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And Game Time ticket coverage, which means your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code ALLSTEELERS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code ALLSTEELERS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Shout out our boys over at Game Time. Did not, and I know you guys are going to be real disappointed about this, did not get to go to Creed. I had Creed tickets. I was going to Creed in Cleveland, and then our freaking water broke. And my wife called me and said, hey, dude, you want me to take care of it? I said, no, I'll come home. So I missed Creed. I'm sure it was amazing, but shout out our boys over at Game Time. All right, we're diving into all your questions. If you got them, please toss them in the chat. I want to answer all of them. I know it's a Victory Monday, so there are plenty to talk about, and I want to make sure you guys have all your answers before we move on with a beautiful snowy. I'm always about the first snow of the year. I'm a big first snow of the year guy. After this, I could care less. After this one, I hate it all. But that first snow, I feel pretty good about. And this one was just a sift. But I live in the city, so they won't clean it up for like, I don't know, a month probably until it's all melted. So until then, this is snowfall for me. Let's dive into some questions here. We'll start with this one. How is it How is it possible Mike Williams was the only guy not targeted? What has to happen for Tomlin and Smith to start using him? What I've been told, okay, and this is from a source, and I would like to validate this source with more sources, but I'm trying to focus on a well-rounded group of things and not really put a guy down who doesn't deserve to be put down. But Mike Williams is still learning the playbook, does not really have a grasp of the playbook yet, and because of that, the Steelers have to wait for him to have a grasp of the playbook. I think there are ways to put him out there and say, hey, you don't know what's going on, but you know this route, go run this route, go run that route. And that's the problem is the Steelers are looking at it and saying, we can't put a guy out there where every single play Russ has to tell him exactly what to do. That's just not, it's not feasible. It's not the best way to go about it. It's not you have to have some accountability. And I understand all of it. I definitely understand that. There's too much going on. The quarterback has too many decisions to make to have to realize or to have to focus on, hey, Mike, go do this or go do that. I think there are ways to put him out there and say, hey, you're only going to get 25 snaps this game. All 25 of those snaps are going to be made so that you are at least running a route where you are a read for Russell Wilson and explain the route before he gets out there. I think that's it. I think you could also say, hey, Mike, run straight, run towards the pylon, look up, maybe the ball will be there. I think that's a possibility too. I don't know when he's going to jump on this moving train. I hope it's soon. I would imagine before the end of the season, just like Akella Witherspoon did for the Steelers a couple of years ago. And I know two totally different guys. I understand. But that's how the Steelers approached that one too, is they traded for him. They felt good about him. They took forever to let him learn the offense. And I think that are the defense. And I think Mike Williams might be in that same boat with the Steelers right now in their offense. And I believe that it's going to come before the playoffs. I just don't know when. And because of that, right now you have to find ways to be advantageous about it and say, hey, look, go do this. This is simple. Look for the ball. Maybe it'll be there. Maybe it won't. While also not giving him too much because he is a liability at this point if he does not understand the playbook. Sometimes it is on the player and not the coaches. And I think this is a mixture of both where you could do more if you're Arthur Smith. You could do more if you're Mike Tomlin. But at the same time, Williams has to learn the playbook and he has to feel comfortable learning the playbook and getting out there and being able to do everything if you're going to trust him enough. Good morning there, Noah. Do you think this W was inspired by how the Cleveland game ended? And how do you think the boys will respond at home for the rematch? Best wishes to Nick. Shout out to our boy, Nick. I do think that the Steelers were fired up, but to be very honest with you, it was wild how calm and collected everybody was during that 10-day break. There was major panic on the outside. Everybody was freaking out. Nobody was okay on the outside. The Steelers were a burning ship. They were sinking fast. If you walked inside, it was like the inside of SpongeBob's head where he tries to be normal and everybody's burning papers and stuff. On the inside of that building, on the inside of UPMC Rooney Sports Complex, they were as calm as can be. And because of that, I don't think that there was much to do with Cleveland, but I do think that they were fired up about getting back in the win column because this is a team that deserves to win, that should win, that has the capability of winning. And I think that's what it was. When it comes to the rematch, yeah, they're going to be fired up. They're going to be feisty. This is going to be a brawl. And I expect TJ Watt, Russell Wilson, Najee Harris especially to go off because they ain't going to talk. They're just going to play. And it's going to be a good one. Good morning, Noah. December is upon us. Y'all be sure to lend milk and cookies out for Cole Holcomb, you know? This was awesome. This was awesome. Shout out Cole. Hope he's doing well. I know he's rehabbing. I see him on the sideline every single weekend. You got to leave that milk and cookies out. This is the comment of the day, maybe the comment of the week. I don't know how we highlight this, but I'm going to send that to Nick and make sure that he sees this while he's hanging out. Shout out Eddie the Great. Shout out Eddie the Great. Hey, Noah, hope you're doing good from Cali. Shout out. Great win. Where do you think they go in the first round next year? Also, I sent you a question on IG. I don't know if you ever get a chance to check it out, but if you do, thank you. I will. I almost never go on Instagram. I almost never go on social media outside of Twitter. I'm just not a social media guy. I think we should all not be social media people, but, I try to avoid it. But I will go on. I will make sure that I check that out. I'll check both accounts just in case you hit up all Steelers. When it comes to the first round next year, I think defensive line and wide receiver top that list if the quarterback situation is solved. And got to expect that it will be. So if they have a quarterback, whether that's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields or somebody else, maybe, I think they go defensive line. I think they could solve their defensive line in free agency. If they do that, I could see wide receiver. But I think those are the two. And it comes to, everybody says, well, you could get a wide receiver in the second or the third round. They're pretty good at that. It's been a while since they've been good at that. It's been Deontay Johnson since they've been good at that. Everybody's sense has been not really that good. So you got to hope that they can find somebody early. I expect them to find somebody early, but my guess would be wide receiver or defensive line for the Steelers in the first round, and that depends on a lot of things. Any update on Calvin Austin? No. As of yesterday, he's in concussion protocol. He'll have to go through concussion protocol. So it was obviously two real nasty hits that he took yesterday. Gotta send your thoughts and prayers out to Calvin Austin. I will probably have an update tomorrow when Mike Tomlin speaks, and then more of an update on Wednesday when I actually get an opportunity to talk to Calvin and make sure he's good. I'm not going to text him the day after a game and say, yo, what's good, dog? I doubt that I'd get an answer if that was the case. And I'm not going to text a source saying, hey, here it is. What's going on here? Because I doubt they have an answer either. We'll get an update tomorrow. As of right now, he will be in concussion protocol, have to clear concussion protocol, which is 3 steps and then a full practice. That's the end of it. He could clear it by Saturday or by the end of Saturday. If that's the case, he'll be back on Sunday, but it'll be a little bit of a process before Calvin Austin is back on the field and we know exactly where he stands for Sunday against the Browns. Where the Mike T haters at? I got to give credit to Mike T. I wanted to highlight this one because, 18 non-losing seasons, and to be honest, I've been around for 5 of them. The best one to this point was the 11-0 start that at the time when it was happening, when you hit 9 games, you were like, here it is, Steelers, this is the best Mike Tomlin season I have covered. Well, where we stand right now, this is the best Mike Tomlin season I have covered. And he looks the best. The team looks the best. You got to hope that it continues. But right now, this is a well-rounded football team that has issues on both sides of the ball, obviously, but have found a way to win with one side or the other when the other side is struggling. And I get it, they have 3 losses, but every team in the NFL outside of them has at least one. And there's only 3 teams ahead of them that have less than that. 4 teams ahead of them that have less than that. And because of that, you got to look at them as a top team in this league. And shout out to Mike T for putting that together. Hey, Noah, do you think the Steelers are finally ready to beat teams like Kansas City and Buffalo? Kansas City and Buffalo, in my eyes, are 2 totally different teams at 2 totally different times right now, but I hear where you're coming from. Buffalo during the regular season is very scary, and I think Buffalo is the second best team in football outside of the Detroit Lions. Kansas City is the most terrifying team in the NFL when it comes to January and February. That being said, they do not look like the team they have been in the past. They are winning games by escaping games. Last year it was they were losing games because they couldn't escape games. Eventually, in my eyes, in my belief, that runs out. You eventually run out of luck. And you got to hope that if you're a Steelers fan and if you are the Pittsburgh Steelers, if you have to play the Kansas City Chiefs, not on Christmas, we're talking in the postseason, that luck runs out. And I would take a loss, a crazy BS loss to the Kansas City Chiefs on Christmas Day if it meant the next time around when you face them in January, that luck is gone. And I think everybody else would agree with me there as well. If it means that you could beat them in the playoffs and you take a loss during Christmas, that's okay. But I do think the Steelers are good enough to beat these teams. I think the Steelers are a real-life contender, and I think the offense is the reason that the Steelers are a real-life contender. Because in games when the defense isn't going to show up, the offense has, and they have to continue to, and they have to continue to get better. But it's the adjustments that they made from a week-to-week basis. It's the utilizing the entire offense and not just George Pickens and Najee Harris. And it's starting to work. That's what you're hoping for. That's what you're looking for. You got to have it continue. I don't know if it's going to, but you got to feel good about the adjustments the Pittsburgh Steelers have made and where it can take them. Just making sure that I didn't miss any along the way here. Could Russell Wilson be considered for MVP, or is it too late, or comeback player of the year? So the NFL has changed the rule for comeback player of the year that you have to be hurt to be considered a comeback player of the year, which makes a lot of sense because DeMar Hamlin should have won defensive or comeback player of the year. Didn't win it. And the NFL was like, well, that was wrong. So how do we fix that? Now you have to be injured or coming off an injury to win comeback player of the year. If not, certainly would 100% win it. No questions asked. When it comes to MVP, I'm putting Russell Wilson in my list of finalists. I'm putting Russell Wilson as a guy that right now is the most valuable player on a very valuable team. He's not going to win it. He's not even going to come close because the separation between Saquon Barkley, Josh Allen, and probably Lamar Jackson is going to be significant before anybody else. But I do think he's in the conversation, at least for that second group of players, even if he didn't play until week 7. What we learned from this game, refs may have something against GP, and Joey Porter Jr. is not a cornerback one. He needs to work on those penalties. Joey Porter Jr. does need to work on the penalties. That has always been an issue with his game. You cannot deny it anymore. That being said, Joey Porter Jr. still has all the potential of a cornerback one, an elite cornerback in this NFL. Has had games where he has shut down big names, and while he didn't shut down big names in this one and didn't shut down big names in the last one, and I get it, that's concerning, it's still a second-year guy in a class where nobody in that class, I mean, Emmanuel Forbes just got released on Saturday, and he was drafted ahead of Joey Porter Jr., a name that people were talking about the Steelers potentially getting. It still shows how good Joey Porter Jr. is. And where we stand right now, yeah, he's got to fix some stuff. He's got to fix those issues, but I'm not overly concerned about where Joey Porter Jr. is headed and him correcting those issues, because there are long stretches where you don't fall for those, where you don't have to talk about him being an issue, and that leaves more promise than the games that he does have an issue. When it comes to George Pickens, George does have a target on his back. I 100% agree with that one, but he's put that target on his back himself, and you have to admit that. George Pickens has done this to himself, and now he's got to correct it. Does Joey Porter Jr. have an issue coverage or penalties, or is it just the league picking on him? I essentially just answered that. I apologize. And here's another one. Is Joey Porter Jr. becoming a liability at about 3+ penalties per game? Again, I think that Joey's going to be just fine. He's got to work on those things, but he's got all the talent in the world to work on those things. And he's got teachers around him to teach him how to work on them in Cam Sutton and Dante Jackson. And that's also massive. I get it that those are not the Jalen Ramseys and the Pat Surtains and all those guys, but these are two very quality corners who have played a long time in this league and can teach him the ways and help him adjust, because Joey's got all the talent. He's just got to make the adjustments. What will it take to actually bring back Najee? If I had to guess, $10 million a year. But I look at Najee Harris and say this, and there's another question in here somewhere about does the large number of quality running backs in this year's draft class drop Najee's price down to a level where we can actually re-sign him? If the Pittsburgh Steelers find a way to re-sign Najee Harris, I'd be surprised, because if Najee's price tag drops and say he's $6 million a year for some crazy reason, the Steelers are not going to be his first option. At least that's my belief, is they're not going to be his first option. He's from the West Coast. He's from the Bay Area. San Francisco would probably be a team that called him. You got to imagine Vegas would be a team that called him. Dallas would be a team that called him. He's just got options in bigger markets, in warmer markets with, just, I don't want to say more promise, but more capabilities at the running back position, obviously outside of Vegas and Dallas. You're talking about two totally different things there, but that's a massive market where he could go and probably would favor over the Pittsburgh Steelers, who would bring him back and say, yeah, here's a 1-year deal to prove it once again. And I mean, I could be totally wrong here, but it just feels like if I was Najee, and the senses I've gotten throughout the years of, just hearing, learning, watching Najee Harris, you got to think he'd want to go back out west. What do you think the refs didn't throw a flag on the cornerback for the pick 6? They weren't fighting for position, and he did push GG. Yeah, yep. So you look at that play and you say, what the hell's going on? But that is just another clear indication of how bad the refs are. I don't know how you fix the ref problem at this point in the NFL, but I do think it needs to be fixed. That being said, I don't expect it to be. The NFL has just bad refs. I think that's what you get when all these guys are part-timers. But, I mean, if a guy is showing up on Sunday to ref a game and has to work another part-time job to pay his bills throughout the week, that's not somebody that you want around. And there are guys who just make money being an official and being a referee, and that's their entire job. I get that, but not everybody. And because of that, you're going to miss calls. So I would say you have to solve this referee problem. I don't think they're going to. Why does Arthur Smith look like a brilliant offensive coordinator one week and like Matt Canada the next? The inconsistency in offensive play calling doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't to me either. But I will say that the 10-day break gave him an opportunity to adjust, and I think that's massive. I think the first time the bye week came around, the Pittsburgh Steelers were 2 games through Russell Wilson where moonballs were still working all the time, and the running game was on fire. And because of that, you didn't have to make adjustments. The running game was going to carry the offense, and Russell Wilson was just going to be a guy that didn't lose you football games. And then you struggle against Baltimore, and the running game disappears. And then you struggle against Washington, and you struggle against Cleveland. And you have 10 days to reassess with an offense that is no longer relying on the running game and no longer relying on Russell Wilson just not to lose games. So the moonballs have to change. The offensive approach has to change. The way to get Najee Harris, Cordero Patterson, and Jaylen Warren involved has to change. And I think that's what gives me promise and gives the Steelers promise, is that the Steelers had 10 days to assess a struggling offense, and they came back and it looked like they made the necessary adjustments. They have to continue those, but I would chalk it up to that, is that Arthur Smith, the first time around during a bye week, didn't have the right offense, didn't have the right outlook, didn't have the right tools to properly assess what was going on. The mini bye week he did. He had the struggles, which were kind of a blessing. And now you have an opportunity to fix them. And again, it looked like they did. Why aren't they throwing to Mike Williams? We already addressed that. I think that it comes down to him, knowing the playbook, but I do think that there are ways to get him more involved and just say, hey, dude, go run to the pylon. We're going to throw it up. Try to catch it. What part of Thanksgiving dinner makes you tap out like Najee Harris did? For me, it's my wife's cousin makes this cornbread casserole thing. Dude, it had me walking like Najee Harris was walking on that run. But that answer was iconic. Shout out to Najee Harris. I think the chill part during the question was my favorite. Like the blaming Pat's girlfriend is hilarious. But as Brooke Pryor is asking the question and Najee goes, chill. That's the best part of that interview. So shout out Najee Harris. That's hilarious. That's definitely hilarious. Just making sure I did not miss any. Oh, well, Alex Highsmith, be back next week. I do think there's a possibility, but if I had to guess, it's more so looking like Philadelphia. That would be my like very confident answer. I would say the door is obviously open for Alex Highsmith to return. Him being doubtful coming into this game leaves promise, or at least leaves some potential that he could take that next step forward, but he was limited, did not practice, limited, doubtful. And there was really no shot that he was going to play in this one. I think next week, it typically takes 4 weeks for an ankle sprain, a low-grade ankle sprain. I look at it and say, I look at it right now and say 4 weeks is this week. Maybe he's available beforehand, but I doubt it. Who do you want the Steelers to face in the first round of the playoffs, and what would you like the Steelers to and what path would you like the Steelers to have to make the Super Bowl? First round of the playoffs, I mean, depends on who makes it. Obviously, the Chargers would be a good one. I don't think they're as dangerous as they look. If Denver is going to make it, I think that's a great one. Rookie quarterbacks do not play well in the playoffs. Houston would be another good one. They don't really look that great right now. Those teams, the bottom, anything below the Steelers would be the move. Baltimore would be like the second tier first team I would pick. But if I had to pick the route, it would go Steelers get the second seed, which might not happen. But they play the Denver Broncos and then the Baltimore Ravens, and then they'd obviously have to play the Kansas City Chiefs, most likely. But I would take the Chiefs over the Bills. I really, truly would. And then the Super Bowl. And that's probably going to be Detroit, if we're going to be very honest. Just making sure I Just making sure what's going on with the defense. I think it's coverage, but I think it's just guys in their head. There was a question earlier about why are they playing so much zone and what's going on with schematics. I don't know, but I think it's because in this game it made sense because Patrick Queen's not going to keep up with the T. Higgins, and Dante Jackson's not going to keep up with the Jamar Chase. You want two guys on those guys at all times. But I don't know. I think it's bad angles. I think they're in their head. I think that once they get down, they're having a hard time rebounding. And I also just don't think that the pressure is there every single down, which is making an impact, because when it does get there, that is when you are seeing these impact plays, obviously, but worse passes, which are more opportunistic. I mean, the Dante Jackson interception is a prime example for the defense. And it starts up front. You got to get consistent pressure. That could come down to TJ Watt being better. But I think they're in their head. And I think that's the biggest part here is it's a mental game where the Steelers defense is just trying too hard because they understand they're behind the eight ball. How does Orlando Brown false start every play and only get called once? Even Orlando Brown caught himself one time and the refs missed it. And then they called a play on Joey Porter Jr., which I thought was very questionable. But yeah, I think it's wild how bad the refs are this season. Where is Roman, man? And we need Mike Williams to make an impact. Roman Wilson, I do not believe is going to play this season. Still remains on IR, but I just look at it and say the Steelers don't have him in their plans. Mike Williams will be the next wide receiver that gets heavily involved. It's not going to be Roman Wilson this year. That doesn't mean he's a bust. It just means next year is when his career with the Steelers will have a better opportunity. Was Russ calling more audibles than usual? Looked like he was running the offense more than usual. I think he was changing protections a little bit, but I don't think he was calling a bunch of audibles. I'll have to go back and really listen. The first time around when I watched this tape for the second time, which was last night, I usually just watch the play. I write down a bunch of notes. I go back through, and there are certain things that I take notes during the live game to make sure that I go back and check that. Audibles, I'll have to talk to Russ about that, but I don't believe so. I think he might have been changing a little bit of protections, but it did seem certainly like the Steelers offense just had a game plan and they were able to execute it very, very well. All right, just making sure I didn't miss anybody. Darnell needs to start hurdling. Shout out. All right. Trying to find we'll finish it off with this one. This is a good one. Oh, no, we'll finish it off with there's one more after this. Cam Hayward dominated yesterday. Father Time may be scared of Cam Hayward. Cam Hayward deserves all the credit in the world. He's an absolute beast. He's a very respectable dude, too. Like, he treats everybody very well, and I think that's the best part about Cam Hayward. He is the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I love that he is kicking butt at all times. And then we got two more, actually. We'll go to this one next. Will TJ make Miles apologize for trying to get TJ to apologize? Who apologizes first and when? I could see, if I had to, you want a bold prediction early this week? TJ Watt goes off, has a hell of a game against the Cleveland Browns. This is a bold prediction. Remember the word bold. TJ Watt goes off, has a hell of a game against the Cleveland Browns. Afterwards, Myles Garrett goes on this rant about how somehow, some way, the Browns got cheated out of a victory and he got cheated out of a more successful game. And that is my bold prediction, that there is no apologies, but Myles finds a way to make this about him, even when it should be about TJ. And we'll finish it off with this one. If Calvin Austin III can't go, Mike Williams will have to learn the playbook by next week. I agree. I very much so agree. This is a massive opportunity for Mike Williams. He needs to take advantage of it. I mean, we could both agree there without saying that it's definitely going to happen. Without sitting here and saying he's going to take advantage of it, without sitting here and saying this is a massive game for Mike Williams, and he is on the verge of a breakout and expect big things. This is the time for the Steelers to see him. We could just simply say Mike Williams needs to take full advantage of this opportunity. We'll see if he does. If he does, this is the beginning of Mike Williams. And you make a great point here, Cody. This is where his career in Pittsburgh could launch off. This season can launch off for him, but it's on him to make that happen. And when does Hard Knocks kick off? It kicks off tomorrow, the 3rd. They've been filming. It'll premiere tomorrow, 9 o'clock. If I'm on there and I'm doing something dumb like farting or picking my nose, just ignore me. I hope I don't get any screen time. But the cameras have been there. I've definitely accidentally almost knocked them over more than once, and I 100% walked right in front of one on Thanksgiving. I walked into practice. The guy's sitting there crouched down filming practice, and I just stopped right in front of him and stood there. And somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, dude," and looked down, and I went, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." So hopefully nothing cool happened, but I hope that my calves are the only thing that gets screen time in this one. With that said, guys, we're heading out of here. Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, find all of our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. I will be back tomorrow, Overreaction Tuesday. So please, I will toss up the graphic. Make sure you are hitting me with your overreactions for tomorrow, because I'm going to need a lot of them. If Nick's not here, I'm going to need you guys to carry the load on this one. Enjoy a snowy but a beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.